When you think of great follow-ups to albums, you think of the likes of Slipknot going from their self-titled debut to Iowa, they're equally as heavy. Or say a Paramore going from Riot to Brand New Eyes, kind of seeing them mature a little more. Then you get some of the weirder follow-ups in the history, like Panic at the Disco, going from their debut, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, to then kind of changing and getting more Beatles Beach Boys-esque with Pretty Odd after a pop-punk album. But there's one album that followed up a really successful one that had one of the weirdest changes ever and really started this whole generation of, I think, change in sound, in music. I mean, this was the album that really did it. What album, you might ask? Well, it's right here. Radiohead's Kid A in 2000. This band had 3 albums out, all kind of different in their own way. Pablo Honey was more post-grunge, and then you get to the Bends and OK Computer, and that was about the time when they were really starting to find their sound and get things going. But it had a weird story behind why they decided to do what they did on Kid A, and today we're going to talk about the weirdest follow-up in music history. So, around 1998, while the band was still touring for their highly successful album OK Computer, things got a little intense. I mean, the band was then working on their 4th studio album, but they saw themselves not being happy with what they made, scrapping a lot of material. But it was then that the mind of Tom York said, you know what, let's try to bend the rules a little bit, do something different. And this time, instead of using more guitar-oriented rock, they decided to go with this more experimental and electronic album, which would be titled Kid A. Now, I know I only mentioned Kid A as the weirdest follow-up, but there's really 2 albums we're going to talk about. There's Kid A, and then there's its so-called Part 2 counterpart, Amnesiac, in 2001, as basically what happened. There was 10 songs for Kid A, and then they had a bunch more songs they had, and they didn't want that to go to waste, so they ended up making Amnesiac a year later. And like I said, this just sees the band kind of straying away from anything they've ever done. I mean, the first song, Everything in Its Right Place, on Kid A will definitely show you that. However, there are some that have guitar-driven songs, like How to Disappear Completely, and Optimistic is probably the heavier song on there, as well as it's mostly acoustic guitar. Not to mention the lyrics, completely random. Yeah, picked out of a randomizer. So that was interesting too. But, you know, you get my drift with things. And the weird thing about Kid A and Amnesiac, Kid A, is that it didn't have any singles or was even promoted at any point in time. It just kind of came out. Amnesiac did have 3 singles, Pyramid Song, I Might Be Wrong, and Knives Out, and was promoted. But I think the reason Kid A wasn't promoted was because they didn't want people to expect what was coming from the band. It was a big change in direction, and they didn't want to promote it right away and have fans like just, you know, walk away from them in a sense. Like nowadays you hear a lot of bands who put out this song that's different from anything they've done, and you'll get the older fans who are into just their older stuff that go, this isn't what I was expecting, I'm not gonna, you know, listen to the new album, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. So they, in their head, they were probably like, let's just make this a surprise album, because with the success our last album had, people are going to buy this follow-up, and we don't need to promote it for us to have it sold to people and whatnot. Once people see it's out, they're going to just grab it and take it. And that's why they did this for Kid A, which still ended up selling number 1, but to this day still never had a single at all. So Amnesiac comes out June 5th of 2001, which is basically, like I said, the same thing Kid A was. It was 11 tracks long, and it was kind of the leftovers, I guess you can say, from Kid A. Maybe even the B-sides, I don't really know what you would call it, but it's practically its sequel. It's Kid A's sequel, and this time around the band was releasing singles for it. They were promoting the album, mainly because they're like, alright, well, people heard what the last one's about. These are songs that didn't make Kid A that are going to be on this one, so now we can slowly work our way into things, you know, with this one and actually promote the album this time, because who knows, some of the new fans who maybe enjoyed Kid A more than their older stuff or just first heard them with Kid A are going to like this one too. And once again, Amnesiac did well. It's not one of their more talked about albums that I would hear about like Kid A is, but you know, it still served its purpose. But anyway, that's 21 songs in 2 years, all the same in their own way, all having experimentation after this band who started off as a post-grunge and then went more into Britpop, kind of just made a big left turn. Now since then, I don't want to say they've returned to their sound, but they have not been shy of experimenting. 2003's Hail to the Thief still kind of went back to the Benz days and OK Computer days, but still had that same ambient, electronic, experimental kind of feel to it. And then in 2007, when they released In Rainbows, you know, that I think a lot of people do enjoy that one. It is definitely a fan favorite, and they did well with that one. 15 Step is amazing. Nobody really talks about Kings of the Limbs that much, because it's not that good, but it's not as horrible as people make it out to be. And then, of course, recently, A Moon-Shaped Pool saw them go more art rocky and whatnot. It was just very interesting with that album as well. But you know all those albums pretty much. You know, people talk about it, and even though Kid A gets talked about in their discography, it's been ranked the 67th best album on the 200 list of all time. But it's just one that you hear about, like, oh, OK Computer is the perfect 10 out of 10 album, which isn't true. And you got like people who the Pablo Honey and the Bends are great, when really it's kind of they're good, but they're just kind of sloppy because they haven't found their sound yet. And then you get people saying In Rainbows is just this masterpiece that we've been waiting for years, and A Moon-Shaped Pool is very, very emotional and probably their best work they've done in years, which also isn't true. I think it definitely beat out King of the Limbs, but I think that In Rainbows is still better. And then you'll have some people talk about 2003's Hail to the Thief. But Kid A and Amnesiac just kind of sit there, and we should be appreciating both albums a lot more for what they did for music, basically starting this whole thing of, I guess you call it genreless music, where, you know, bands or artists are just willing to go out there and do anything as long as they're having fun with it. Because in the end, I'd rather have an artist make music that they're enjoying as well as the audience than trying to force out something that they're not having fun making. I mean, literally, Radiohead was on the verge of breaking up at their peak, and then Thom Yorke said, you know what, let's try this, let's see what happens, and boom, everything changed for them again down the line. They went from successful rock band to, at the top of their heights, to just changing the game of rock and just becoming, I guess you can say, legends in that sense. So, you know, if you're a Radiohead fan and you never gave Kid A the chance it deserved, trust me, give it 2 spins, 2 or 3, and tell me what you think afterwards. It might not fully be your cup of tea, I get that, because I've seen articles rate this a 10 out of 10, a 9 out of 10, and really it's probably like a 7.5 or 8 out of 10, but it's high points are just great. Very, very great. Songs I would recommend checking out are Everything in Its Right Place, the national anthem, How to Disappear Completely, Optimistic, Idiotech, and Motion Picture Soundtrack, because that's what this whole thing sounds like. It sounds like ambient music, electronic music for some sort of like drama movie in a way. So, yeah, that is it for the weirdest follow-ups to Successful album in music history, in my opinion. You can tell me in the comments below, what are some weird follow-up albums to successful ones that you look back and go, that was weird. One another example I can think of was Linkin Park, going from Minutes to Midnight to 1,000 Suns, experimenting more with the electronic, because at least with Minutes to Midnight, they still caught people's attention with the rock elements, but once you get to 1,000 Suns, everybody's like, where did this electronic soft bullshit come from? And it's my favorite Linkin Park album of all time, 1,000 Suns is. So, yeah. Anyway, that does it for me. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you guys in the next one.